worldview. If you listen to the dividing line, the briefing this morning, if you were watching social media last week, I mentioned actually at the beginning of my discussions there in St. Louis that I was not at all surprised, honestly, by what I was seeing in regards to Chip and Joanna Gaines. I'll be honest with you. My wife sometimes does watch HGTV. I do not. I would imagine that Rich is a lifetime subscriber to HGTV. Now, you've watched every one of their episodes? They're good. Okay. Well, I have seen absolutely none because I don't watch HGTV. Not my thing. Not my thing at all. But anyway, everyone is, of course, up in arms because, well, how can this be? How can you get to sue Christian bakers for not making cakes to celebrate homosexuality, but on the other hand, dressmakers can say, I'm not gonna provide any dresses for the first lady because of the stance and the positions of her husband or something along those lines. As long as you continue to expect fairness, lack of hypocrisy, consistent standards, anything like that from the secular totalitarians, you're going to live a life of utter and constant frustration. These individuals don't care about consistency. They don't care if they are using different standards. Secular totalitarianism is an entirely different world. And you are not going to expect that there is going to be any kind of fairness in what's going on. Now, what happens is, you see, HGTV has two letters in it that are very important. TV. And that means it's the entertainment arena. And this is the temple of secularism in our land today. And so to get into the temple, it's sort of like, remember what happened to poor Paul? Paul was accused of bringing Gentiles into the temple, and they just about tore him apart. Well, it's the exact same mentality amongst the secular leftists. They are totalitarians. They do believe that everyone must think and act like they do. We must celebrate all the things that they do. They do not have a basis in their worldview for the concept of freedom of speech, liberty of thought. No, secular totalitarians are just that. They are totalitarians. They want to control everything in the society, including the very thought processes of everyone. And there's a reason for it. There is a reason for it. I have a graphic. If you've ever seen the debate that I did with Dan Barker, I illustrated the difference. I'm going to see if this is going to work. Let me see if I can make this work. I don't know if it will or won't or whatever, but I'm gonna see if it's possible. You getting just a plain old white thing over there? Okay, let me see if I can get this to work. In the old world. Okay, hello. The center of everything was God. And everything else out here, and anything else in the fields of human knowledge, let's say whether it's history, whether it's science, whether it's medicine, whether it's morality, ethics. Ethics is a shorter word, so it's easier to do here. Whatever it is, in the olden days, these things were held together by the recognition of the existence of God as creator of all things. And so I'm down here, and as I relate to God, then I can have true knowledge of these other things because they are a part of the same creation in which I am. And so I don't have to be infallible and omniscient because God's infallible and omniscient. He's big enough to hold it all together. And so I can be the finite human being that I am and yet still have meaningful knowledge, sufficient knowledge, as my creator defines that to be, of ethics, science, medicine, history, art, everything else in the universe. The problem is that that's not any longer really a possibility because God has been erased out of the center here. Isn't that interesting? It almost looks like it's leaving, like it's a real whiteboard, doesn't it? It's okay. I'm going to have to somehow get out some cleaner. What? Yeah, I can see that. That's pretty much what it looks like up on the screen up there. Pretty much identical to that. So if you take God out of the center and you take me out of being part of what God has created down here, and you put, as a secular humanist, you have to go, I'm now the center. I'm now at the center. I am the autonomous creature. I am not sufficient to hold all these things together. To make this work, I have to be omniscient. That's why you end up with radical skepticism. Because I could have false knowledge of these things, and I don't have any reference to anyone who would be the standard of objective true knowledge of all things. And so a secular epistemology is the very essence of a failed epistemology. It's not gonna work. And what happens is once you start trying to function in this way, then if someone comes along and they choose not to accept your claim to be that autonomous creature that defines everything else, what upsets your apple cart? It destroys your epistemology. And that's why they tend toward totalitarianism, not toward libertarianism, not toward liberty. If I believe that God defines all things, hey, if you disagree, if I think you're just completely wrong, your disagreement doesn't change the nature of reality because you and I don't define reality. But once mankind's put in the center, we define reality, and therefore disagreement is rebellion. Disagreement is destructive to the entire experiment. And so you listen to these totalitarian. You want to see this illustrated? Sadly, look at France right now. Look at what is happening in France right now. France is a proudly secular nation. We can bring that down. France is a proudly secular nation. It is part of their charter, their government. And so what are they doing? What happens when you try to consistently apply secularism? Well, what you're seeing immediately is the first and foremost set of freedoms that is destroyed: freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, freedom of religion. And so you have French police on beaches forcing Muslim women to take off their burqa. Why? It has nothing to do with security. It's not, well, you can hide a lot underneath there and they're afraid that people are going to be blowing themselves up. That's not the issue. The issue is you're not being secular enough. You are making by that statement of dress, you are rebelling against the secular morality that says there's no standard of, you should not be demure, you should not be modest, you should be showing more skin. You can't cover that much skin and be like the rest of us, and we all have to be together. See, there can't be freedom, there can't be expression, there can't be liberty. They may use those terms, but we all have come to understand that for leftists, words only mean what they want them to mean, and only to a certain extent. And so now you have France outlawing pro-life websites. Dr. Moeller talked about it this morning on the briefing, where you have France basically saying, well, not only outlawing pro-life websites, but there has been a move recently to across cultural boundaries to celebrate the wonderful people that we all know who have Down syndrome, because the vast majority of them are not being born anymore. Over 90% of babies that are diagnosed in the womb with Down syndrome are aborted now. But we've all met some of these really special people. And so there's sort of a movement to celebrate these folks and to recognize the contributions that they make and things like that. Well, that is an in-your-face repudiation of the culture of death, which identifies human worth based solely upon arbitrary quality of life issues. And that's not a high enough quality of life. And therefore, it does not have value. And so there had been commercials celebrating the beauty of people with Down syndrome, and they were banned by the French government because they might make some people feel uncomfortable with the choices that they had made. The choices that they had made. And so you have them banning pro-life websites, banning commercials, all on the basis of what? You see, one of the things that you and I just have to hit on immediately in our society today is when people say, you can't force your worldview on me. Any person that says that has a worldview they're trying to force on you. They just don't want to admit it. Secularism is a worldview. Oh, but it doesn't have a God. But it does have ultimate authorities. It's still an ultimate authority paradigm that determines ethics and morality and everything else. It is a worldview. And these people recognize if it's put out there on the same level, if people start realizing, well, wait a minute, you're shoving your worldview down my throat. You are silencing me on the basis of your worldview, they might start fighting back. And so you're just not even allowed to say this. It's just immediately shut down. We can't talk about this kind of stuff. But the reality is secularism is a worldview, and it is an incoherent and destructive and anti-human worldview that it's robbing the current generation of transcendent meaning and value, the concepts of self-sacrifice, self-discipline, all these things. If you can't, I know most of us just sit back and we chuckle at this because it's so stupid, but when you see people that are supposed to be adults looking for safe spaces and teddy bears, something has gone wrong. The truthfulness of the 18-year-olds storming the beaches of Normandy in 1944 versus 18-year-olds who can't even talk to a woman because they spent the majority of the years they were supposed to be growing up staring at a screen shooting zombies. Something has gone wrong here. Something has gone wrong here. The pushing back of the time of marriage until now, it's pushing into the 30s. And one of the reasons for it is that because people aren't grown up enough yet. They're just not mature enough yet. Why? What's going on? I was taught when I was raised, I had a responsibility in my teen years to be maturing, to be taking responsibility for myself, to be contributing to the family, because once I turned 18, I was responsible for myself. Not anymore. What are you told now? What is everybody told in our society now? That you as a parent are responsible for paying for your kids' college. That has been absolutely burned into our brains. My parents never said, don't worry, son, we'll take care of your college. I knew that they probably were not going to be able to do that at all. They might want to help as much as they could, but that was going to be up to me. That was going to be my job. That's my responsibility. And so in high school, I earned my college. They're called scholarships. They were called scholarships because you never got a B in high school. Now, would it have been more enjoyable for me to have gotten some B's in high school because I could go and play and be immature? Sure. But I realized that I was taught, once you turn 18, you're responsible for yourself, man. And all of that was based upon a worldview that said God has made you in such a way that you are responsible before him and you have responsibilities to other people. All that's falling apart. I read I wonder if I can find it quickly here, because it was in my feed. So it might still be here. Let me see if it. Yeah. Good old Michael Fallon, who we still haven't gotten together with to call and do his. I mean, he's just the world's greatest marketer, and I'm the world's worst marketer, and so we need to do something about this. Mike posted Patrick Deneen, Notre Dame professor. Our schools are committing civilizational suicide. Now, let me just read this to you. This is worth your time. It fits in with everything else we're talking about. My students are know-nothings. They are exceedingly nice, pleasant, trustworthy, mostly honest, well-intentioned, utterly decent, but their brains are largely empty, devoid of any substantial knowledge that might be the fruits of an education in an inheritance and a gift of a previous generation. They are the culmination of Western civilization, a civilization that has forgotten nearly everything about itself, and as a result, has achieved near-perfect indifference to its own culture. By the way, I would just add that the reason for this is a culture that becomes embarrassed that its predecessors lived in the light of the existence of God is a culture that must enforce amnesia upon itself or live with constant shame, a self-imposed foolish shame. But all of this goes back to Solzhenitsyn was right. What's wrong with the West? It's forgotten God. It doesn't live in the light of its own creator. It's Romans 1 all over again. It's Romans 1 being lived out. But anyway, I go back to the article. But ask them some basic questions about the civilization they will be inheriting, and be prepared for averted eyes and somewhat panicked looks. Who fought in the Peloponnesian War? Who did fight in the Peloponnesian War? You could almost have figured that out by watching the 300 movies. which guys who do first-person shooter games only watch because of the CGI, not because of any of the history. But just think Athens and Sparta. And anyway, who fought in the Peloponnesian War? Who taught Plato, and whom did Plato teach? How did Socrates die? Just be careful what you eat. Anyway, raise your hand if you have read both the Iliad and the Odyssey. The Canterbury Tales, Paradise Lost, the Inferno. Who was Saul of Tarsus? Boy, we better get that one right. What were the 95 Theses? Who wrote them? And what was their effect? Boy, you better get that one right. Okay? You better get that one right. What does the Magna Carta mean? How and where did Thomas Becket die? Who was Guy Fawkes? And why is there a day named after him? Boy, when I was down in New Zealand, it was Guy Fawkes Day, and there was all sorts of fireworks going off and all sorts of neat, fun stuff like that. But does anyone know why? That's even a day of celebration. What did Lincoln say in his second inaugural, his first inaugural? How about his third inaugural? What are the Federalist Papers? What our educational system aims to produce is cultural amnesia, a wholesale lack of curiosity, history-less free agents, and educational goals composed of content-free processes and unexamined buzzwords like critical thinking, diversity, ways of knowing, social justice, and cultural competence. Our students are the achievement of a systemic commitment to producing individuals without a past for whom the future is a foreign country. Cultureless ciphers who can live anywhere and perform any kind of work without inquiring about its purposes or ends. Perfected tools for an economic system that prizes flexibility, geographic, interpersonal, and ethical. Wow. Wow. Our students are the achievement of a systemic commitment to producing individuals without a past for whom the future is a foreign country. Isn't that the case? Isn't that the case? But how else can it be in a secular society? Because there is no future that has meaning. Because there was no past that had meaning. If I am autonomous, if I get to determine today I'm a male, tomorrow I'm a female, tomorrow the next day after that I'm going to be a canine, and then after that I'm going to be, you're going to need to call me Z, Zer, and Zim, and the day after that it's Yi, Yer, and Yim, and all this other abject, insane stupidity that is worthy of not an instant of respect, but now is being placed into law, which means law becomes something that is not worthy of respect either. But if I am this autonomous creature, then I might find it interesting to know what happened in the past, but only for entertainment value. And future? Well, once I'm gone, what does it matter? I mean, what's even the basis for wanting to pass something on to your children? And of course, even when you say pass something on, the first thought anybody has is what? Material things. Not a heritage, not a connectedness to their ancestors and those who came before them. Man, that was falling apart even when I was younger. I mean, I was in my 30s, maybe even 40s before all of a sudden I started going, I'd like to know a little bit more about my grandparents and my great-grandparents and where they come from and all that kind of stuff. I'd sort of, and it was because of my study of history that I started realizing I really haven't had a lot of emphasis in my life upon what has come before me. And of course, if you don't know about the great intellectual movements and theological movements that came before you, then you are determined by those things, but you can't examine those things. You can't look at yourself and go, oh, wow, I think this particular way because of what has happened in the past and because of what's gone on in Western culture, and this happened in England and this happened in Germany and blah, 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 blah. I can't do any of that. I'm totally dependent upon that stuff. I just live in ignorance of it and just figure that's just the way I am. You really don't end up knowing yourself very well when you don't know anything about history and when you don't think there's going to be a future. I mean, you know there's going to be a future, but why should I care about it? I'm not going to be here. I think that's why you see the willingness of Western cultures to absolutely indebt our children to their eyeballs. We're not going to be around. What does it matter? eat, drink, and be merry, spend far more money than we actually have, because everything's about me anyways. Anyway, that sermon was not a part, by the way. That's just those of you listening by audio. The last paragraph here is, but even on those better days, I can't help but hold the hopeful thought that the world they have inherited, a world without inheritance, without past, future, or deepest cares, is about to come tumbling down, and that this collapse would be the true beginning of a real education. Wow. Think about that. But it fits. It fits really well with what we are looking at here. And I've been saying over and over again, I say to the young people, you've been robbed. You have been robbed. Every time you buy into the secular mindset, the secular worldview, it's me, the autonomous human being idea, you are robbed of the highest aspirations of what it means to be created in the image of God. And the end results, when people can go on college campuses and the people on those campuses can't tell the difference between Donald Trump and Fidel Castro. Yeah, you heard about that? Yeah, which one's worse? Total, complete, moral, ethical collapse. Sadly, the only thing that cures this is complete societal breakdown and war. That resets everything. And that's frightening. Really, really frightening.